Hey everyone, it is episode 451 of This Is Whole Life. We are in rain-drenched, gloomy, cold, damp Orlando, Florida. And it looks that way for at least half this week.
So, I thought we weren't participating in the polar vortex.
I didn't think we were, but then...
I did not sign up for that one.
Yeah, obviously when I saw 34, at least for Altamont, is the low for, I think, tomorrow. Wow. So, yeah, it's close enough to freezing for me. This makes me think about how much further I can move south. It doesn't... I thought I took care of that a couple of decades ago, but here we are. So, first off, before we get started, guys, if you haven't listened to the message yet, wholelife.church, and right on the front page, you will catch last week's message, because sitting across from me is Melanie Bockmann, our worship pastor and speaker for this week. Ken is back from just a couple short days of just time off.
It was wonderful. Thank you, Melanie, for not just kind of covering, but just amazing. It was such a good sermon. Questions with Lucas is coming up shortly to my left. And so I just want to say, I really feel like that I want you to know you were heard. Okay? I saw you. I heard you.
Thank you.
And by the power vested in me by punching my own major hurricane card at least 6 times over the last 24 years as a true Floridian, I think you get a full punch on your card.
Thank you.
You get a half a punch for finding your car under a tree at the airport and then driving it home.
Yeah,
and then the other half is for the overflow, the 15,000 gallons of water in your...
It was all worth it.
I really want to give her the full punch, but I just can't. I think you have to be here to go through it. I think that just having the...
So 3/4?
Randy giveth and Ken taketh away.
Well, I think I haven't been here as long as Randy, so I would say that his Floridian opinion matters more than mine. But I just think that until you've actually, rode one out,
because it could be worse. Because when you get
but I definitely
home to
think the 3/4 punch. I'm the worst part of any hurricane or typhoon is the after.
I probably didn't think that all the way through. And if you haven't bought and eaten hurricane snacks before the hurricane gets here, in the hurricane, like the last peanut butter pretzel from the giant tub at Costco, as the first band gets to you and you go... Those were good. What am I going to eat for the rest of the hurricane when the lights go out?
That's what's happened with me.
So it probably needs hurricane snacks to get the last quarter. But
all right.
You definitely you're one of us though. Don't feel like you're being set to the side. Like, oh, Melanie doesn't really know.
Thank you.
No, I think Melanie knows.
The worst part is for sure the cleanup.
Oh.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, that's in knock on wood. I've only had water come in my house once through the roof, and at least that's buckets, right?
Yeah.
You can manage for as long as that happens. Once you go, what's that sound? Who's going to the bathroom? And then it's like, oh no, yeah, that's and that was just a tropical storm. That wasn't even a hurricane. So you the getting right into it. You said when containers don't contain, messy and dangerous and expensive things happen. And the first thought was, wow, immediately my mind started racing like a pinball machine over what those things are, could be, might be, probably know some of them already. How many of those are? And most of the time, the mess is always bigger than anticipated. You think, what's the worst that can go wrong if something happens? And then it's always... like the pool couldn't hold it all. Give me a break. Come on, pool. What are you even doing?
What are you even for?
Yeah, what are you even for if you're not here to protect me? And then to think about those immediately, I kind of zoned out. I had to go back and listen to the message again because my mind was just stuck in.
That's where I lost you.
Well, it probably was just my overimagination, or just thinking about. Because if you think about the way that we, and this makes a good analogy, compartmentalize things and put those in maybe containers, it's a nice metaphor to kind of work this through. And what do you do when you know you've got something there and you're like, ugh, if I let it out, it's going to be bad. But then what container gets stronger over time, or after you've dropped it a couple times, it's got a crack in it, or, like longevity is not on their side. Eventually, it's going to break and it's going to be worse than if you'd have just broken the top off of it. Coming up soon to a podcast near you. So that just had me all over the place thinking about those containers, and just for myself, I sat here after Lucas left, and we went downstairs and moved everything, got everything cleaned up, came back up here, and I think I sat here for half an hour, still thinking about these. And so I'm just wondering if I was the only one who has enough containers here at the table that was like, this. So I'm hoping that there's others that took that part and maybe took a little time to think of maybe what is sitting in a container that could potentially need a little breaking, or at least a breaking of the top, give it a little air, let it breathe, see what's happening.
Well, so last week when I was thinking about this sermon, I was thinking about the story of the woman at the well that Ken talked about a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I was reviewing that story, and I noticed at the very end when she leaves Jesus to go back to the village, John's really specific. He says she left her container behind. And I started thinking, left her container behind? Huh. And so that's what kind of made me pivot in my head to start thinking about, what are containers that I've had to leave behind in my life? And what containers do I still have that maybe need to be left behind? Or in the case of the woman who anointed Jesus, which ones need to just be broken so that they can never be used again?
Well, outside of the fact that, you started early on letting everyone know, like, I would really dig deep into this if there weren't 4 stories that were literally at war with each other over, who was there, what happened, how it happened, and all those things. And as I was thinking about that, kind of that piece, and how sometimes if we just concentrate on that, it might throw us off a little bit one way or the other. Like, why don't we know more? And then the question that came more for me was, why was the woman's identity not important here? Was that just cultural? Like, well, women didn't really have any rights in that culture, or like it doesn't seem like we know anything.
That's the really funny part, because in one of the accounts, Jesus says, this beautiful thing that she's done for me, everywhere the gospel is told in the whole world, basically from now on, this story is going to be told alongside. You would think that somebody would have been like, psst, hey, so what's your name? Because maybe I need to write this down. But no.
It's Melanie it's a Melanie with capital M.
John's the only one that mentions a name. And so he says that she's Mary from Bethany. So from John's perspective, she was Lazarus's sister.
But not everybody agrees,
but
doesn't
the
mention.
other 3 don't say specifically.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So if it was... But that doesn't seem to be, maybe this is a picture I have of Mary, Lazarus' sister. She wouldn't seem to be someone that maybe would be as disheveled or maybe in the shape that this person seems to be.
Well, so that would be Luke's version.
Okay.
Because Luke's version was actually, this is something that the scholars talk about, is his mention of the weeping. But yeah, from Luke's version, especially from the perspective of Simon the Pharisee, who Luke says was the host of the feast, he says that Simon says, this woman is sinful. Everyone knows this woman is sinful. She's well known for this in the town. So I think that's where we get the picture of this woman anointing Jesus, who is the sinful woman, which some people have just assumed maybe is Mary Magdalene. But
yeah, I've heard that too.
So yeah, that's why there's not agreement on that.
Interesting. So essentially, there's no way to know for sure.
Nope.
Just guess.
You have to just go with it.
I
think the important thing.
Pick up the jar you'd like and take it with you.
why do women need names when they can be identified by their husbands or by their towns or by their reputations?
Well, even so,
I hope you heard the facetiousness in that.
I didn't.
What? Well, what's facetious mean? Word of the day, Melanie. Word of the day. No. But the the retelling of, I think you said it was in Mark that retells it, is the word, uses the word shatter versus break.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool. That if this is something that really needs to be gone from your life, or that you need to leave behind or just walk away from, don't break it, that you could put it back into pieces and go, oh, my pretty. That's my pretty.
Well, it's the same idea. The word is the same idea for like Satan being trampled underfoot.
Wow.
Or like in some of the Old Testament prophecies. Does that make sense? Some of the prophecies where it talks about the wicked being smashed. Smashed.
Same.
So it's the same idea.
That's interesting that they would, but he was the only one that used that one specifically.
Yes.
That's wild. And when we just got done talking about her kind of, sort of being the mess, and the challenge then you said was that maybe the real mess was reclining around the table with Jesus, and her overflow exposed the mess that was present before her arrival. Okay. And that one gives you, the what am I trying to say? The similarity maybe to politics and inner circles and all the things that go on, and even Jesus, who's here and is perfect, and even within his own circle you have this mess going on. And part of me looks at that and goes, man, how in the world do we have any chance?
I think it means we have every chance.
Am I looking at it from the wrong way
around?
So I'm like, man, these, and I know it's always fun to beat up on the disciples and the inner circle anywhere you go, but that you're sitting there and you're watching Jesus tell this person, like, what was their thought process other than what we know, the things that were blurted out and were told, like Judas, like going, hey man, that was money in my pocket that, no, we're going to sell that and give that to the poor.
Right.
Totally mean the poor. But other than those, like, what were they thinking? Trying to put myself in that position where Jesus, you're appalled or you're upset or you're just like, what did I just watch? Mm-hmm. And Jesus is like, that was beautiful. Mm-hmm. And thinking, again, what don't I understand about whatever it is that he's talking about that we consistently just go, huh? And I thought that was interesting to think about, just what kind of dynamic it was in that room, and probably how uncomfortable it was to be in that room if you weren't, well, maybe Jesus too, I don't know, but that was a unique thing. The left with only fragrance, that was my favorite part, because when the moment you said it, you ended up going there, but I thought, man, as much as you can, like, certain perfumes, maybe I'm someone that's pretty sensitive to perfumes. So if I hug someone at church, which I like to hug people, then you're like, oh no, this is in my, it's like, it's on me now. I can't get it off. I've got to go to the bathroom and try to wash because I'm going to get a migraine from this.
Oh no.
But to think about the possibility that just even a day later, as Jesus is going through everything that's going to happen that day, and of course the day after on Calvary, that maybe, just maybe, a little smell of that perfume and him, but also the bittersweet. Like, I've had these dudes with me forever, and this is the person that in maybe my last bit of comfort on this planet, through everything I've been through, that might be one of the things that maybe gave him just a little. I mean, it makes my heart feel good to think that maybe he had just a little bit of comfort. Like, these humans, they're not all bad.
Yeah, I really appreciated that imagery. I think we all kind of have pictured that that perfume being poured on Jesus, but the imagery of the shattering of it in a pint, a pint of really potent perfume. This isn't something mild. It would have been really strong smelling. It would have been, and when you were talking about, I thought it took me back to being in high school. When the boys come out of the dorm drenched in car, they're like,
hey, careful,
and it's like,
careful how you talk about your car now.
I know, right? And just
polo,
exactly, just
obsession.
It's like the door opens for a banquet, and you're just like, okay, guys, like a little dab, and it's you don't have to bathe in it, and this is exactly what happened to Jesus. Literally bathed in this, and that beautiful thought about Jesus maybe catching or smelling it as he's going through the horrific, beating, whipping that happened, then being on the cross, and to smell the love that person had, and at least I can't remember which one of the Gospels, Melanie, you probably do. One of them talks about this woman knows what's going to happen to me, and so is that Luke? Because
it's actually, I think it's Matthew and Mark.
And so, which makes sense why Luke would say she's weeping. If she kind of understands that Jesus is about to die. She really is the only follower of Jesus that the Gospels gives us that really takes Jesus seriously when Jesus says, "I'm about to die."
Yeah,
and so
you're not always going to have me.
And she actually, and Jesus says she's prepared my body for burial ahead of time, and so it's just this beautiful thing where Jesus goes, "There is somebody who gets me. There is somebody who understands what I was saying. There's somebody who is listening. There's somebody who loves me." When he's completely abandoned by his disciples, that perfume, and it would have been an interesting thing that this, you would. I don't know how it is for you, but when you get like a scent in your hair or your beard, if you've had a beard, it's Melanie.
I hate when that happens.
Yeah.
I can grow a beard either.
But yeah, you get
high five, Lucas. We got this.
But that scent sticks around. I mean, it's there. And for Jesus, the people who were abusing him maybe could smell it. He could smell it.
Yeah.
And so there was that reminder for him. And so it really, truly was just an incredibly beautiful thing that this woman did for Jesus. She got it.
Yeah.
She understood it.
I think you can kind of grasp at all kinds of different straws, but just sometimes it's fun to think of different things. Like, in the Old Testament, they used to light incense, and it was the smell of the incense represented the prayers of the people. And so that was another thing that I thought of, that, in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus is asking the disciples to pray, and they can't stay awake and pray, but yet there's potentially this beautiful scent that, I don't know, in another context, that scent might have represented prayer as well.
Wow. No, I resonate, Ken, with what you just said. When I get migraines, I take peppermint essential oils and put it in the mustache and at the bottom of the nose and let it go. And that does a wonderful job of helping to offset or hopefully mitigate from the get-go. Not always 100%, but it works really, really well.
So we highly recommend scent in your mustache.
But don't get the cheap stuff. Don't get the cheap stuff. Buy the good oils. All right, it is now time for my favorite part of the show. It's Questions with Lucas. What do we got?
Wow, we have a new segment name.
We do.
Thank you. Okay, so in the first service, Matthew asked, isn't it interesting when God gives us little, we seem to be content? Maybe I'm looking at this from the wrong perspective, but to have an abundance can sometimes be overwhelming. I don't know. What do you all think?
Having an abundance, overwhelming.
Let's throw that to the person who preached the sermon.
Well, I'm
Dr.
not sure.
Bockmann, please.
I'm not sure. Maybe I don't know if he's referring to the perfume or if he's referring to Jesus' response to the woman. I think maybe if he's referring to the response to the woman, I think maybe at least from from some people's perspective, even just not rebuking her might have been considered kind. But the fact that Jesus goes all out and says, this is amazing, this is beautiful, this story is going to continue to be told, leave her alone. In one of the accounts, he says, Simon, do you see her? And she's right there. She's just dumped out a bunch of perfume. Of course, he can see her, but that's not really what Jesus is asking. He's saying, Simon, do you see her? And so in that moment, if you're that woman, and I think this is also why it's so kind of poignant for her to be unnamed and yet very, very seen by Jesus. And so, I don't know, I feel the abundance of acceptance and love and acknowledgement that Jesus gives, I think, to her is almost in proportion, probably from her perspective, to the amount of perfume that's on the floor.
Nice.
And we also have a question from Ken.
Oh, what?
So I can't answer this one.
I was not in the chat enough this week. I can see that.
Let's hear what Vacation Ken has to say.
This was first service. I was hoping it would make it into the Q&A, but I see somebody took my advice.
Ken's like, if you preach long.
So Ken asked, do you think God purposely causes us pain to create overflow?
No.
Well, that was quick. Sounds definitive.
No, I don't think that that's how that works. I think that we live in a world where there is pain, and I think that God is gracious enough to help us work through the pain and help us to use the pain so that it's not wasted.
Ooh, use the pain. Ooh, that sounds like something Yoda would say. Use the pain, Luke. Don't waste it.
Don't waste it.
No,
I don't know. Ken, do you have any follow-up questions?
I mean, there seem to be a whole lot of Bible stories that go in a different direction than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the Bible stories are written from the perspective of people who believe that God's caused the rain, and they caused this, and they caused that. They caused your womb to open or caused your womb to close, and we know now that that's just not true. So when somebody says in the Bible, God did this to this person, I have to ask myself, did God do that to that person, or did that happen to that person and that was interpreted as God doing it to the person?
Okay.
I don't know. I guess I do take a little bit of a different viewpoint on it. I think that I don't think all pain is bad. I think that we I think good parents create pain in their children's lives occasionally. Because they recognize that smaller pain can ward off larger pain in other circumstances. I'm not here advocating spanking or anything like that, but when you ground your child, that creates psychological pain. When you take somebody and have them work out in the gym, there's pain involved in that. When you have people, you think about the military. When you go through basic training, if you were to go into special forces or any one of those things, they talk about the more you suffer during training, the less you suffer out on the battlefield. And so I guess I don't believe that God takes delight in causing pain. I don't believe that God is just mean about it, but I do think that God does allow pain into our lives, and that's the other part is if you're whether God does it himself or whether he's allowing it.
No, isn't it a result of sin?
Yeah, but wouldn't there be? I don't know. I tend to think that there's. I think that our current culture is pretty pain adverse. We don't see benefits to it, and I think there are benefits to pain.
I'm in pain a lot. I think it's great.
You have to presuppose. I mean, you're presupposing the existence of pain, and even as a parent, I mean, you might allow, like you said, small pains to avoid a bigger pain. But if it was an option to not do the pain, would you, as a parent, not do the big pain or the little pain?
Of course, if there wasn't an option, I think that I guess that's the thing, though. I don't know that God. I think that with the predicament that we find ourselves in this world, that God doesn't always have the option to just allow us to, he could, but it's, it's the bus bearing down on us and God knocking us out of the way. You skin your knees, but you miss the bus that you're just standing right in front of. And so, yeah, I think, again, I don't think God gets joy out of creating. I think that there is a kind of a sadistic side of Christianity that thinks that God just kind of gets some sort of personal joy out of hurting us and causing pain. Never in my life have I enjoyed punishing my kids or creating pain in their life. And yet there's been times where I have done that because I was concerned about a larger pain that they could be, that would create larger problems in their life. And so I guess that's one perspective.
Yeah, I wouldn't. So you've reframed it a little bit, I think, differently from the original question. I think the original question was something about, does God
purposely cause
pain to create overflow? I don't think that. I agree with you. I think that there's a sadistic side of Christianity. And so I was told after our son was killed, I was told, God is doing this for this reason, or this is the beautiful thing that's going to come out of it. And my thought was, so you're saying that you think God did this to me so that I could learn this. And I don't think that that's true. I do think that, I do agree with you, Ken, that sometimes the lesser pain that can prevent the larger pain might be an option, but that's still not purposely inflicting a particular kind of pain on someone.
The thing for me, though, Melanie, on that, and I think that we have to be really, really, really careful when we start telling people, well, God did this to you for this reason. God inflicted this pain on you, whatever. I think that can get into the area of presumption, right, of like you somehow know what God is doing. I also know this for me, and I'll just only speak for myself. I really desperately want my children to spend eternity with me. I want to have them in heaven. It matters to me. And if it meant God doing something that was really painful to me to get my kids' attention, 100%, I'm down for it, because their eternity matters a lot more to me than my 70 years here on earth. And so for me, if God allowing something or even doing something to me to get my kids' attention, maybe my community's attention, because we see this happening with the prophets a fair amount in the Old Testament, the question is, am I open to that? Am I open to suffering so that somebody else can have so God can get their attention? For me, the answer is I don't want it, but if that's what it takes, yeah, I want my kids to know Christ, to love Christ, and to spend eternity in heaven.
Yeah.
Right
or wrong, I kind of feel like it's the Job where, the devil's like, hey, I already know where I can get this person all the time, or let's amp it up, and God's not going to say, yeah, do it, but he's also, where he can say, yeah, do it, but also there's limits. There's what you can handle. And so I don't know if that's if that's just an allegory and that story's not true, maybe that doesn't mean anything either. And it's just the way I've looked at it. But at the same time, it feels like I don't feel like God is purposely putting his thumb on people and inflicting pain, but also there's too much pain for him for it to be that he doesn't allow it or doesn't have some piece to play in it. I don't know for sure what that is.
And that's the other part, though, that I just also want to be clear about. There's a lot of bad things that happen just because we live in a world that's sinful and bad things happen. I don't believe that every death, every every bad thing that happens is God somehow doing this. I think it's, what the parable says, the enemy has done this, where it has sown these things. So there is that mix of things, but I'm also very hesitant to not say that God not only doesn't allow, but sometimes does create pain to avoid a bigger pain. Yeah. And that's the part that in my mind, as I'm wrestling with these things, that I do see a loving God who loves us, doesn't want to hurt us, has plans, good plans for us, and yet also cares enough about us to say, what do I have to do to ensure the greater good and loving thing. So, but I think that can be that's sure an easy thing to say, sitting here in this studio right now at this moment in my life. It's another thing altogether, if something bad does happen to me, to be able to say that 6 months or a year from now, and to sit here at this microphone and say that too, and because it's another thing altogether. And so I don't at all want to be. I think that sometimes as Christians we're very flippant with the pain that people are going through, and it's like, oh well, God has a reason for it. Well,
good.
Okay,
thanks. I think
I don't see the reason. I don't feel the reason. I don't. And we become like Job's friends that sit there with a person that is in abject suffering, and just well, let's figure out what you did wrong, because you must have done something wrong, or let's go ahead and figure out this grander purpose that God has for it, because we're all searching for meaning. And sometimes people are in that place, or not. They're at a place where they're just like, hey, I'm just hurting. Can you just be here with me?
Yeah.
And not try to put your spin on why this is happening to me.
Don't put your spin on it, please.
Yeah.
Please. What else we got, Lucas? We have more?
Yeah, we have one more from Tisinko. She asked, is our hesitancy to break the containers the fear of chastisement for becoming vulnerable and making the mess? Our fear may be of criticism, but what might be the ultimate result if we are willing to be uncontained?
Ooh.
Wow.
Great question.
Man, I'm glad I wasn't preaching this week.
There were some words here that I had to look how to pronounce. That's how good this question was.
Good job, Tammy.
That's good.
No, I think that it's. I'm not sure that question has an answer so much as it has a lot of potential for reflection. So I really like that question. I think it's something that each person has to think about for themselves.
Nice. Well, I did get Carla actually sent me an email. She is our youth and young adult pastor, and she got a question from a student who texted her this week and said, "Hi, Carla. Hope you're doing well. I was wondering if you could help me with something. I listened to yesterday's sermon, and it really touched me and gave me something to think about, especially when Miss Melanie asked what has to break. To that end, and something I've thought of since our church announced our theme was how to overflow when you feel broken. Or is that something you can't do? And that's when you need to let God pour into you so you can overflow. A verse that has also kept coming to mind for me personally when I think of our theme is Proverbs 4:23 that says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. So how do we overflow, let's say emotionally, when we feel emotionally burnt out? My apologies, there were a lot of questions and there are not necessarily a specification of how you can help. But to make my request clear, I was wondering if you could ask that last question next week in the chat, accompanied with the Proverbs 4:23. So, student, whoever you are, great
Fantastic
thoughts.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that text about guarding your heart, because it's the wellspring. I think this is where the metaphor can go one of two ways. We can think about containers as things that hold us back from being able to overflow, and then we can think of ourselves as containers, because you know there's the text in the Bible that says you are the potter, we are the clay, so we're formed. So we can, and when we're thinking of ourselves as containers, especially if we feel like a broken container, I think that is really hard. And one of the things that in Ken's sermon a couple weeks ago, when he did the original illustration with the cups purposely had holes poked in them for the purpose of the illustration, because none of us is a complete vessel that is completely unharmed, and except for Randy. I think all of us to some degree are going to have some cracks or some chips, and some of us are going to feel pretty broken. And I think that we have to be able to receive, to be able to overflow. And if you're not feeling like you're receiving enough to overflow, just hold on. Because I think we go through periods of times in our lives where we feel a little bit dry. We don't feel that overflow. That doesn't mean it's never going to happen. It just means that there's a season. I think about in Deuteronomy where, God says something to the effect of, I let you feel thirsty, or I let you feel hungry so that I could feed you, or I let you feel thirsty so that I could feed you. And there's something about knowing what it feels like to feel dry, to be completely overwhelmed and grateful for the overflow when it happens. So that's probably not a good comprehensive question or answer to a very, very, very comprehensive and good question.
No, but I think what your response is also in what they've done already by reaching out. And when you feel that part where you don't, and you're asking and leaning on somebody else to maybe pour into you a little bit, a little knowledge, a little hopefully a little, hey, you're doing great, go get them, and lift you up a little bit. And so I hope that between answering the question and reaching out, that if that's the way you're actually feeling, that maybe just a little bit got put back today.
And you know what? If you need to talk more about whatever it is that's happening, that's what we have an awesome pastoral team for. So
absolutely. And then I know, Melanie, we got to get you out of here shortly. We had one more that came through the text message line. So it was a busy week when we had email, we had text, we had the chat, we had Ken even in from out of town. It says, "Hello again, favorite podcast. Melanie, wow, what a sermon. In fact, I don't know if I would call it a sermon. It's more like a beautiful storytelling. The container needs to be broken before it overflows is a concept I had never considered, but it totally makes sense. I'll be praying about what needs to be broken in my life because I want to overflow. Do you think it's necessary to have the desire to overflow for God to fix what's broken? Why is it so easy for us to see what's broken in others? I hear you. I see you. I feel you. But so hard to face the truth in our own lives. Your faithful listener, Mariana Parente." Thanks, Mariana.
Thank you. Yeah. Boy, there are all these good questions that are coming in. Yeah, I don't. Maybe that's what we need to do, is just have a get together where we each tell each other what's broken.
I'll be sick that day.
There's small community.
Yeah, the Overflow small community.
Yes.
Yeah. So someone's gonna have to raise their hand and volunteer.
That would be the Truth Tellers Club, I guess. So.
Ouch.
Yeah. I also, I think sometimes, for example, when I've prayed for patience, it's not like I receive this beautiful sprinkling of the gift of patience. It usually means that I'm going to be around a lot of people who irritate me, and I'm going to get to practice patience. So I realize that's a very light illustration compared to what.
As I look around the room,
I was not talking about you, Randy.
She was. She was talking about all of us.
Tuesday morning, it's too early for all this nonsense.
The mortals she has to hang out with.
Oh man!
I don't remember where I was going with that, but it was something to the effect of, Yeah, I think praying to be broken can, I think, be aware of what you're asking for.
Isn't that the truth?
Just know what you're asking for.
Well,
because you might get it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? It's a difficult. I think that we all should be praying that God does whatever needs to be done in our life to help us not only know Him, but to be a blessing to the world around us. And it's a difficult prayer, and it's a scary one, because when you start giving God permission to do those kind of things, it isn't always comfortable. But it is, in my experience, the way that leads to growth and to blessing around you.
Yeah.
Do we have any more questions? Or I just wanted to say one of my favorite moments in the sermon, one of the things that left me pondering, was Melanie used a text, was it from Isaiah, about Jesus being crushed? Was it Isaiah 53?
Yeah. Isaiah 53.
You quoted that? And that was, to me, it was just this, and it kind of goes maybe along with a little bit of what Mariana was saying, but Jesus being crushed was this beautiful fragrance, right? That he is crushed, like the plant that you talked about, which, by the way, just love that backstory on the perfume and where it came from and how that was just really cool. But boy, that, just to Mariana's point a little bit there, is that being crushed, Jesus being crushed, emits this beautiful fragrance that I'd never tied that metaphor together with this particular story, and I just thought that was really, 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 really beautiful, smart, just a really great part of that sermon. So just really good. And that's the bonus of having a week off and getting to listen to somebody else preach, is just hearing some just it was really good.
Yeah, no, it was
thought provoking. That's to me the best sermon is the one where you go home and you think, I need to think a little bit more about this. So,
and you can't help but do it. It just does it.
Yeah,
it's got for sure. Well, you kind of wrapped up with, at Whole Life we love to party, we love to have a good time, we do it well, and the T-shirt, the whole T-shirt thing, just that was perfect. I enjoyed that a lot. And you said, but you know what else I found out? When it's a mess, we are also ready to roll up our sleeves and get involved, because that is what community does. That is what community is. And that is what we can be together this year, but what needs to break. And a little bit earlier you said you threw in there, and I thought this one was good, and maybe something we'll leave with, maybe even your theology.
Maybe.
I was like, ooh, now we're picking out the pieces. Now we're picking, but it's good. It's good. It's there's actually nothing more satisfying to me than when someone says it differently, and you go, just like what you said, Ken. You disconnected that piece. You're like, that was awesome. And those can be bigger or smaller in the realm of how it affects my theology, but that to me is one of the funnest pieces, is when you learn something biblically about God, or a piece of the story that shows and reinforces who God is to you. Man, that's the most fun and all. So, all right, we have Overflow next. Let's see, we had
The Ground.
We have
The Ground. That's right. I was trying to think of the graphics. That's usually how I remember. When Lucas gets done with it, I'm like, okay, that's cool. The Ground.
Yep, we have the final.
That's
final
the last
part,
one.
The final part in this series, and of course we'll be talking about Overflow all year long. But this is in this series, and then we move on. Anderline will be preaching week after. So I'm preaching this week, and then the week after that, Anderline will be preaching as we kick off Black History Month. And the week after that is our Black History Month concert. So that's going to be fantastic. And then we jump into a series called Unreasonable Church.
Ooh, based off the book. Sort of.
Well, there's for those who don't know, there is a book out there called Unreasonable Hospitality.
And I only know about it because we had to read it.
Yes, it was required reading.
We got to read it.
I'm sorry, we got to read it.
And you can look at. I don't care either way you want to put it. You were required to read it. You had the opportunity. All of the above are true.
It's one of the better reads we've done, so I appreciated it. It was one of my favorites. It was good.
So it's I want to. it's the idea for the series is based off of the book, but it's not about the book. No.
But once we get to that point, we'll put that in the Discord or put it in the show notes or somewhere. And so I'm so happy that a bunch of you have found the Discord channel and have been hanging out there a little bit. So do pass that around. Anything else? I feel like that's it, right?
Well, except for next Saturday night.
Yeah.
Remember how I said whole life likes to party?
Oh, that's right. It's your birthday today. Are we celebrating next week?
No, I'm talking about Ken's birthday party.
The potluck of the half century.
We are. We're going to celebrate all the January birthdays. In fact, let's just make it all the birthdays.
Yeah, I stopped celebrating after last year, so
yeah,
we're good to go.
Too bad you'll be celebrating today.
Well, that's awesome. All right, I guess that's going to do it for this week, guys. Thanks for listening and have a great week.